Are you interested in productivity and how to optimize your day-to-day life, but you're also looking for some realistic advice because you have a regular 9-to-5 job? Do you feel like most productivity tips and life hacks usually come from people who are self-employed and who can manage their day how they want, whereas us with more traditional jobs can't? I do too, so that's why I'm dedicating today's episode to how to be more productive if you are working a regular 9-to-5-ish job and you have limited time and energy to do anything else. Welcome to the Binge on Self-Love podcast, where we explore what happens when you stop waiting and start living, even though you're scared as hell. I'm your host Anna, and there's absolutely nothing special about me, except that I've decided that I'm done procrastinating, I'm done binge eating, and I'm done hating myself, and I'm ready to start living my life right now. And I'm taking you along for the ride. So if you are ready to do the same, you've tuned into the right podcast. Let's get started. Binge on Self-Love is intended for informational purposes only. It doesn't provide professional medical advice and it is not a substitute for diagnosis or treatment. Personally, as a procrastinator, I'm always on the lookout for some advice and new findings on how to be more productive and how to get more done. Or should I say, how to get at least something done. The good thing is there are tons of advice and guides and productivity tools that can help us to become more productive. But my problem with a lot of those tips and advice is that they don't really reflect my reality. They're not really meant for someone who works Monday to Friday from 8 to 6 or 7 p.m. To give you a better idea what I'm talking about, here are some of the tips I read online. Don't read your email until noon. Not really something I can do at my job. Turn off your phone and leave it in another room. Do the hardest thing first. It's great on paper, but oftentimes you don't really get to choose what you start your work with. Work from different locations. Use your best hours. The truth is, I spend my best hours at work. Wake up an hour earlier and do what you enjoy. Schedule your day around your energy peaks and take breaks whenever you feel like it. Absolutely unrealistic for most of the jobs. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not mentioning this to mock anyone who's trying to help. I think it's always up to each of us to take the best out of any advice and tailor it to our circumstances and capabilities. It's just that it's not always possible or feasible to apply that advice if you're not working for yourself and you don't get to choose when and where you work. Or if you're working shifts, for example, then your entire schedule is very different from us working 9 to 5 or from those working for themselves. Plus, I can also imagine if you have a family, a lot of your schedule revolves around getting your kids to places they need to get, like school and other activities. And that leaves you with a limited amount of time and mental capacity to work on anything else, on your hobby or your passion project. So I think the biggest difference is that we spend most of our best hours, meaning the hours when we have the most energy and drive to do anything, at work. So we just need to be aware that our lifestyle might require a slightly different approach to productivity. I'm so far from being a productivity queen, but I do really care about how to optimize my schedule and how to get more done. So I prepared a few things that I find helpful in terms of productivity and getting things done as someone who 1. Works a 9-to-5 corporate job, B. Has a side project that I want to dedicate my time to, and C. Struggles with severe procrastination. So my tip number 1 is to understand what hour or hours in a day you can dedicate to doing something that matters to you. Now, what I mean is looking at your day-to-day schedule and looking at what times of the day you usually don't do anything important or meaningful, and you could actually free that time to focus on what's important to you. So let's say that On weekdays, my time from 7 a.m. until 6 or 7 p.m. is a no-go. That's when I get ready for work, when I commute to the office, and when I work or when I eat. Plus, let's say that I need an extra hour and a half that I spend on preparing the food and eating the dinner and taking a shower and meal prepping for the next day and chatting with my husband. So that leaves me with free time early in the morning, let's say between 5 and 7 a.m. And with free time in the evening, let's say from 8 or 8:30 onwards to dedicate to something that I want to do. So realistically, that would leave me with, let's say, 2 hours available every day. And oftentimes I use those hours just scrolling through my phone or watching Netflix. I'm not really doing anything meaningful. So that means I can use this time for something more productive. Then on the weekends, I'm usually free, so I can dedicate much more time to anything that I want to do. So now that you've looked at your daily schedule, you figured, for example, that between 8 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. is usually a time when you are done with work, your kids are taken care of, and you have a time that you can dedicate to your passion project. This is something that helps me ease up my mind a little bit, knowing that 5 to 7:30 a.m., that's my workout time, and 8 to 9:30 p.m., that's when I focus on podcast, for example. But let's not forget that we're not machines, and that even if we find time in our calendars, it doesn't always mean we'll have the energy or motivation to do something meaningful, which brings me to my next point. Be realistic in how much you can get done. I've actually talked about this with my friend the other day, that often the expectations we have for ourselves are so out of touch with reality, it drains us even before we start doing anything. Like my ideal, in air quotes, routine looks something like this. I wake up at 5 a.m., I work out, I get to work, I come home, I get dinner, and then I spend 3 hours recording and editing podcasts and 2 hours working on social media. And I also find time to read and have a French lesson, and then I spend time with my husband. My expectations of how much I can get done in a day are very out of touch with reality. So we have to accept, as hard as it may sound right now, that it's just not possible to squeeze 1,000 things into your day. If you have a job, if you have a family, if you have other commitments, expecting you have unlimited number of hours in a day will only make you feel drained and miserable. One thing that has been helping me is prioritizing in my head which 1 or 2 things out of those 1,000 things are actually the most important to me. And then I try to focus only on those. So for example, for me, it would be working out and working on my podcast. These are 2 things that I figured are the most important to me at this moment, and those are things that I want to focus on. The second part of having realistic expectations is knowing that your schedule might change. Sometimes the meeting will run over. Sometimes you'll have to stay late at work because of some ad hoc issue. Other times you'll get sick, or your kids might need something and there's an emergency situation that you need to take care of. And as much as we all wish we could always stick to what we planned, it's simply not realistic. So I think we need to realize that it's okay that sometimes things don't go as we planned, and sometimes we simply won't have the capacity to work on something else. This is something that my therapist helps me navigate, because I struggle to understand that it's absolutely normal that some days I'll have the time and energy and ideal circumstances to work on my project, but then there will be days when I'll have only 30 minutes or 10 minutes or even no time or energy at all, because I have to simply deal with other things that are more important at that moment, and that it's absolutely normal and that it's absolutely okay. My tip number 3 is take a break between your regular work and the other work. This is one personal tip that I found very useful, especially if you are working from home. I usually work in the office, but sometimes I work from home. and I spend all days working on my computer. But the problem is that what I like to do in my free time, which is this podcast, also requires me to work on my computer. And I found it difficult sometimes for me to switch between both because my eyes are tired and my mind struggles to differentiate between work and like personal work. And I also tend to procrastinate on my, let's say, personal work a lot more because of that. So what I found helpful is taking a short physical break to mentally and physically switch between work and my personal time. So what I do is I usually go out for a 15 or 20 minute short walk around the block just to move my body and get some fresh air and refresh my brain. I know that some people like to work out after work, which I think is also great how to switch between work and your personal time. Personally, I need to work out in the morning, otherwise I will talk myself out of it, but it's all about personal preference and finding what works for you. Tip number 4 is, if possible, have a set wake up and bedtime routine. Now, I do understand that not all jobs and lifestyles allow for having somewhat set wake up and bedtime routine, but if it does, I think you should take advantage of it. I found that if I go to bed around 10 p.m. every night, I find it a little easier to wake up in the morning and go to the gym. Whereas if I go to bed at 11 p.m. or even later, there's like no chance I'm waking up that early. My tip number 5 is to create routines that allow you to focus less on the, let's say, operational stuff and more on what you want to be really doing. So for example, what I do is that I meal prep every evening, so I don't have to worry about food the next day at all. Or I do have specific days when I do the house chores, like I do laundry on Friday and I clean the whole apartment on Sunday, and it kind of helps me get those things done without really having to worry about them. And then I have more capacity in my mind to do things that I really want to do. My tip number 6 is to allow yourself to rest, but I really mean it. Allow yourself to rest. I don't mean to doom scroll on your phone for 2 hours or watch a Netflix show you don't even really care about just so you don't have to do anything. I found that extremely important. If there's a side project or a hobby that you really want to focus on, you have to have some energy to do it. And in order to have energy, you need to rest. And I think that scrolling through my phone for an hour is not really a rest. I don't feel rested. I feel like I usually feel worse after I come off that phone than before. So allow yourself to rest. Do nothing. Read a book. Go for a walk. But use it in a way that will really help you to refresh yourself. My tip number 7 is to start small. I wanted to learn French for literally 15 years. I always say it in this podcast that one of my goals have been to learn French, but I always kept failing at it. To be honest, I don't really have time or energy or even a priority to be taking weekly lessons at this point right now, but I also know that when I tried to do self-studying with a book and videos and everything, I was never able to stick to it. But what I've done is that I've downloaded the Duolingo app. By the way, this is not a promotion at all. I wish, but it's not. And I do French exercises every single day for a few minutes. Sometimes it's 5 minutes, other times it's 20 or 30, depending on how much time I want to spend there. But where I'm getting with this is that I started small. When you think about it, you don't have to set like 2 hours every day to start something or to focus on something. No, you can start small. Do what feels achievable. My tip number 8 might be a little controversial, but I sometimes try to apply it. And that's, if you are short on time, do something that's pleasant, but also useful at the same time. For example, sometimes when I'm really busy throughout the week and I have so many things that I need to do, but I also want to meet with, for example, my friend or someone, why not go to a Pilates lesson together instead of just sitting at a cafe for 2 hours? This way you can combine your workout, but also maintaining a social life. Or what I do very often is that I listen to some educational podcasts while I work out or while I'm cleaning my apartment. So I'm kind of combining the pleasant and useful. All right, so these were all of the tips that I had for how to be more productive if you are working a 9-to-5 job and you don't have as much time or energy to focus on your hobbies or your side projects. I hope at least some of those tips were helpful for you. If they were, I will be very happy for your feedback. You can DM me on Instagram at Binge on Self-Love, or feel free to review this podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you are getting your podcasts. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being part of our Binge on Self-Love community. Have a great rest of the week. Take care. And until next time, bye. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I would like to ask you for a small favor. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to the Binge on Self-Love podcast on your favorite podcasting platform. It's absolutely free and it will help me spread the podcast among more people. Thank you in advance and see you soon.